It is the vote that could bring to an end 300 years of history and break up the United Kingdom. On September the 18th, the people of Scotland take part in a referendum on independence. And the debate has been fierce, not surprising really when you consider what's at stake. Now more than 130 business leaders have weighed in with a letter in the Scotsman newspaper. It says a yes vote would be bad for business and bad for Scotland. Our business correspondent Jonty Bloom reports.
So far, politicians have dominated the debate over Scottish independence, but now 133 executives representing companies as diverse as the distiller of the famous Grouse whisky and the chairman of HSBC Bank have come out against an independent Scotland. They've four main worries: Scotland's relationship with the European Union, changes to tax and regulation after independence, how Scottish exports might be affected, and perhaps most importantly, what currency Scotland would use. An issue addressed during a key debate on independence earlier this week. The pro-independence campaign claims a currency union with the rest of the UK would be the best option, but there are alternatives.
I know there's other options for Scotland. I mean, we could have a Scottish currency, we could have a flexible currency like Sweden or Norway does. We could have a fixed rate, a Scottish pound attached to the pound sterling. That's what Denmark does with the euro. What I'm seeking a mandate for is to have the pound sterling, so that we pay our messages, we pay our mortgage, we get our wages in the pound.
But the three largest UK parties have all ruled out a currency union with an independent Scotland.
The question that was asked was, if we don't have a currency union, what's plan B? Now, I had no luck 3 weeks ago when I kept asking him what plan B is. He either can't say, or more likely, he doesn't think we're going to like the answer. I want to know what plan B is. Well, so do you. Go and tell us.
Well, you don't have to point, Alistair.
After accusations that businesses with real concerns about the economic feasibility of an independent Scotland have failed to speak up, voters will now have a better idea of their fears. Jonty Bloom, BBC News.
So what are the implications for business both here and in Europe? Let's go to Cambridge to speak to international banking consultant Bob Lyddon. Bob, you know, having looked through the debates and read all the various bits of coverage, one of the problems, it seems to me, is the lack of certainty, which is why businesses might preemptively, pull back because they just don't know what's going to happen.
Yes, they're bound to. I mean, really, 3 weeks before the referendum itself, businesses and the Scottish people should really be looking at what is the draft separation treaty. Will Scotland have the pound? If it doesn't, will it have currency, its own? If it has its own, it must have its own central bank. Really key questions of the parameters in which Scotland will go into an independent world.
But this has been an excellent showcase for Scotland. If it stayed as part of the UK, one sees it almost in a different light. Its ability to be entrepreneurial and so on, and very creative, has received a fantastic forum.
Yes, that's true. But I mean, I think I've just come this evening from a dinner of international bankers, and there are enormous concerns about how banks will interact with an independent Scotland if it takes the option called sterlingisation of trying to use the pound without the support of the Bank of England. Well, in a way, if it doesn't then take on any of the debt of the UK, it's in default, and none of these international banks will set up credit lines for Scotland. That doesn't just mean lending to the Scottish state. It means lending to any consumer or business in Scotland. It just won't happen.
So banks are not really taking the view that, of course, it would not be in Britain's interest to allow Scotland to become unstable, and therefore you can take that as a given?
Well, they don't think it's their problem. If Scotland becomes unstable, that's Scotland's problem. And I think the concern is it's talking itself into an area of instability. By maintaining that a currency union is possible, it isn't possible. The basic deal is Scotland gets the oil and gas. In exchange, it's got to take a share of the national debt, and the quid pro quo is it can't use the pound. That's the basic outline of the deal in the separation treaty, which there is a chance that the rest of the UK might sign. Part of that is not that Scotland would walk away from the debt, because the rest of the UK will never sign off on that. goes for this sterlingisation, using the pound outside of a separation treaty, outside of an agreement of the Bank of England, effectively it's walked into a default. And then it can't join the EU.
OK, but, you know, businesses can't easily pick up and move overnight, can they? So at some point they kind of have to make a call. Are you saying that the currency issue is really that call?
Yes, it is. It's massive. I'll tell you that the kind of investors I speak to, Chinese, US, they certainly wouldn't consider going ahead with investments in a country where somebody who may be Prime Minister of that country in 18 months' time is threatening to walk away from a due share of national debt. A country that's saying we may not bother having our own central bank. These investors would not be able to get an investment case through their own committees going into a country with those characteristics. They'll just look elsewhere. Investors in Europe would just hold back. From what I hear, the people I speak to, there's really no chance of Spain, we know about that really, Spain, France or Italy supporting Scotland applying to be in the EU if it has split off from the rest of the UK in an acrimonious manner and not taken any of the national debt on. They just will say that's not a country that is eligible to join the EU.
Thank you very much indeed, Bob.
OK, thanks.
Now, few things